And today I want to talk about 3 possible price paths for Bitcoin. If you've been following this channel, you know that I'm basing my Bitcoin price targets on some of Plan B's papers. A great way to learn about this is to read this paper and then listen to this podcast that Plan B did with Stefan Livera. In that podcast, Plan B talks about the price targets for Bitcoin that are produced by his model. And those are, he has basically 2 models. We'll be talking about the more conservative one that has lower price targets. The more aggressive one actually has a price target of $288,000 by the end of this year. But we're going to go with the lower ones because the numbers are still quite high and would produce amazing returns from Bitcoin at this price of $31,000 per Bitcoin. So the basic model is predicting $100,000 Bitcoin by the end of this year, by the end of 2021, $400,000 Bitcoin by the end of 2024, and then $3 million per Bitcoin by 2028. We'll have one halving in 2024, then another halving in 2028, just like we had in 2020. This is when the miner reward goes down, the miner subsidy goes down, and as a result, you get a supply shortage, an extreme supply shortage of new Bitcoin. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, and I haven't talked about this for a while, is that Wall Street functions by pricing in available information. And this is what people talk about the markets being efficient or the efficient market hypothesis, EMH. And what this means is that if Plan B's model turns out to be true and works for this halving, in other words, if we get close to $100,000 in Bitcoin by the end of this year, there's a very good chance that the quants on Wall Street, institutional investors, pension funds, hedge funds, begin to front run the model and price in future halvings. This is something very similar that happens to a stock. If everyone knows sort of behind the scenes that Apple's going to have a blowout earnings report, the stock will begin to rally ahead of earnings. And even if you get a very good earnings report, the stock could then stay the same or fall as earnings are actually priced in. Buy the rumor, sell the news, as they say. But these things, the markets are reasonably efficient. These things do have a way of getting priced in. And what this means, if you begin to attach just fairly random probabilities, so let's say that we think there's a 20% chance that Plan B is right and that Bitcoin goes to 3 million by 2028. And let's say that there's an 80% chance that the whole Bitcoin experiment fails and the Bitcoin goes to 0. If you have these 2 probabilities, you can multiply them and add them to come up with an expected value for Bitcoin. So 20% of 3 million plus 80% of 0 still gets you to $600,000. This would be the expected value. This is really where Bitcoin should be trading today or very soon if Plan B's model gets priced into the market. Maybe we apply some time value discount to this because 2028 is 8 years from now. That being said, the cost of money right now is very low, so I imagine the discount rate would be very low as well. And so maybe $500,000, $550,000. This is still more than 10x up from where we are now. So now I want to move on to a really good podcast that discusses these issues a little bit more, and I think it's a good way of thinking through 3 possible price paths for Bitcoin. This was a podcast, an interview done with Bitcoin Tina on the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. I'll link to it below. Bitcoin Tina is the Tina part. I believe that Bitcoin Tina is male. He sounds male, and the Tina just stands for there's no alternative. Obviously, an anonymous account. I think Bitcoin Tina does a good job of summarizing the podcast in these tweets from the end of December 2020. So the three possible price paths would be, and this all occurs sort of against this background of Plan B's model. The 3 price paths would be: 1, we would have a repeat of what happened in 2013 and 2017, where you had a big run up in Bitcoin and then a crash. If we look back at 2017, Bitcoin's price really ran from about $1,000, $900,000 to $20,000, so up 20x in 2017, and then it retraced all the way back down to the low 3,000s in 2018. And this also happened as the Fed was beginning to tighten and also letting their balance sheet sort of roll off and contract. So this was the fourth quarter of 2018 was also a very bad quarter for stocks, crypto, Bitcoin, risk assets in general. This is one way that Bitcoin moves. This is how it's moved in the past before people really had Plan B's pricing models, some of these valuation models. This, as I believe Bitcoin Tina is correct when he says this is the typical view of Bitcoiners. And so I know there's a lot of obsession. I get a lot of questions about this. At what point do you take profits in this run up? And then you basically sit out in fiat, you sit out in US dollars or euros or yen and wait for the crash and then buy back in. I don't think this happens this time. This is the consensus. I think because of the huge institutional wall of money, that's going to be very difficult for Bitcoin to crash very much this time. It can certainly go down 20 or 30%, but I think it's extremely unlikely that we see another 70, 80, 90% drawdown as we did in 2013 and 2017 leading into 2018. So that would be the first price path, which would be a parabolic move up and then a crash back down. We're currently in that most bullish part of the cycle, the 18 months following the May 2020 halving. That would be the first price path. The second price path, the second alternative, would be up. Bitcoin basically goes up anywhere from 2x to 5x each year in 2021, in 2022, and 2023. If it's just going to go up 2x in 2021, maybe we've already had a lot of that move, and then 20 to 40% corrections, and then a big move up, basically trying to price in this $400,000 by 2024. So that would be the second possible price path. Both of these are fairly difficult trades simply because if you it's very difficult to time the top. If you have a parabolic blow off top and then a crash, very difficult to know how to get back out. Also very difficult if you're going to hold on and watch your money go down 70 to 90% or whatever it could be, whatever it was in 2017. I think it was close to 80 or 90% drawdown. So that is a difficult trade. This one is a difficult trade as well, simply because it's hard to buy something that's doubled and then doubled again, especially if it's going up 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x every year. So that would be price path number 2. Price path number 3, and this is the one that Bitcoin Tina seems to think is much more probable or possible than people think. And he's very clear to point out that these are 3 paths. No one knows which path Bitcoin will take. He's obviously says he doesn't know either. But I think that markets have a way of moving that try to frustrate the most people. They try to hurt the shorts, tries to hurt the longs. And so in this third price path, Bitcoin would basically it would begin to price in the halvings and would do something like we were talking about here, but it would do it very quickly. It would do it in 2021 and maybe the beginning of 2022. So we would immediately move up quite sharply to $500,000 to $1 million per Bitcoin and then chop around sideways. What would make this the hardest trade for people is that how would you feel to buying Bitcoin at, or a fraction of a Bitcoin? Obviously, you don't have to buy a whole one. How would you feel about buying Bitcoin at $200,000 per Bitcoin this summer? It just seems crazy, especially since it's run up so much. Just running up from 20,000 to 30,000 feels crazy enough. But if it's at 200,000, who is going to want to buy it? I then imagine it goes to 300,000, 400,000, 500,000. And then people finally capitulate and buy it. But at that point, a lot of the Plan B model gets priced in. And then it just chops sideways. And so people can't really make any money from the volatility anymore. Anyone who didn't get in has been basically priced out. And this is kind of the most, would probably be the most difficult path for most people. One argument that Bitcoin Tina makes in this podcast is that something similar happens with stocks. The two examples he gives are Walmart and Tesla. And we do see this. These are monthly bars. For Tesla, we can see how a stock has a tendency to trade within a range, and then some sort of new information comes out. The stock gets repriced to a new range. And in the case of an experimental tech stock, or what it used to be, what Tesla used to be, very sort of clinging to life and either having a good chance of going to zero or going very, very high, you get this sort of volatile sideways range. Now, if we scan out, we'll see that something similar happened again. We're probably fairly close to the end of this. We've had basically a 9x move here, and then maybe we chop around for a couple years going sideways. That would be my price prediction for Tesla. I know a lot of you have asked about it, but the bigger point here is that this is how markets often move. If we take another look at that, sideways, repricing, sideways, very volatile sideways chop, can be difficult to make money shorting at the top and buying at the bottom, and then you get a massive repricing again, followed by sideways motion. So this would be the third path here for Bitcoin, where basically we've been chopping around sideways for a couple of years in a trading range. We've broken out of that trading range, and now we're going to reprice to a trading range that's somewhere in the mid to high 100,000s. I think this is there's a reasonable chance of this happening. I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen, but it would be absolutely incredible, and it would also really get ahead of the regulators. If it happened this quickly, it's hard to know how regulators would respond. They already seem to be fairly worried. We get the comments from Janet Yellen and Christine Lagarde and Rogoff, all these people trashing Bitcoin and saying that it needs to be controlled a little more closely. We can imagine the political backlash and the economic backlash that would happen if this repricing happened. And so this is one way that Bitcoin Tina could be correct in this third price path, where Bitcoin moves fairly quickly up to $500,000. I know this sounds crazy, but I think there's a much higher probability of this third price path than many people would believe.